A 6-year-old girl was selling candy at the traffic lights to buy medicine for her sick grandma. But when she started coughing up blood at the window of a millionaire's car, something inside him stirred. What happened next would forever change both their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. The millionaire adjusted his Italian silk tie as he surveyed the city from his penthouse high above. A glass of 30-year-old scotch rested between his fingers, the amber liquid reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. Around him, the minimalist, designed apartment in shades of grey and white remained deathly silent. Not even the tick-tock of a clock dared to disturb that sterile atmosphere. He checked his platinum watch, a gift he'd given himself upon closing his first billion-dollar deal. He was late for yet another meeting where he would be feared and admired in equal measure. After all, one didn't become the youngest CEO in the country by being nice. Business demanded ruthlessness. People were just numbers on spreadsheets. Feelings were luxuries he couldn't afford. As his chauffeur drove the limo through the downtown streets, the millionaire typed furiously on his laptop. He needed to finalize the acquisition of yet another failing company. Hundreds of layoffs were planned, but the profit would compensate. It was just business. Miles away in a neighborhood the millionaire would never visit, small, trembling hands organized colorful candies into crumpled plastic baggies. The girl coughed repeatedly, trying to muffle the sound with a faded rag. She didn't want to wake her grandma, who had finally managed to fall asleep after a whole night moaning in pain. The makeshift shack they called home barely protected them from the wind whistling through the gaps in the boards. A corrugated iron roof, supported by a few rotting wooden pillars, sheltered a thin mattress where the old woman rested, covered by patched but impeccably clean sheets. It was a few square feet of dignity that the girl struggled to maintain. "Grandma," she whispered, approaching the mattress, "I'm going to sell the candies today. I'll get money for the medicine." The old woman opened her eyes, clouded by fever. Her lips, cracked from dehydration, tried to form a smile. "You shouldn't. The streets are dangerous," she murmured, too weak to complete the sentence. The girl held her grandmother's bony hand, feeling her hot, dry skin. The fever was getting worse. The antibiotic the back-alley pharmacist had recommended cost almost $100, a fortune for someone who lived on pocket change. "I'll be back soon, Grandma. I promise." Swallowing tears and ignoring the dizziness the fever caused, the girl put her baggies of candy in a small cloth sack. Before leaving, she kissed her grandmother's forehead and straightened the only photo they possessed. A faded picture where the girl smiled, with fewer teeth and more joy in her eyes. As she walked to the main avenue, the girl rehearsed her best smile. She had learned that smiles sold more than tears. People liked to feel they were helping someone cheerful, not a sad burden. So she smiled even when her fragile legs barely supported her small body. She smiled even when the cough tore through her chest. She smiled because it was the only thing she could offer the world, besides sugary candies wrapped in hope. The sun beat down on her already tanned skin when she arrived at the busiest traffic light in the neighborhood. There, amidst horns and exhaust fumes, the little vendor approached closed windows with a resilience that didn't match her 6 years of age. Neither of them could have imagined that the red light that was about to turn on would forever change the course of their lives. The black Porsche stopped at the light, purring like a satisfied predator. Inside the refrigerated vehicle, the millionaire frowned as he realized his video conference had been interrupted by the poor connection. He cursed softly, annoyed by the wasted time. Seconds to him meant thousands in deals. That's when a dry cough caught his attention. He reluctantly turned his face and saw, through the tinted glass, a small silhouette approaching. He sighed in irritation. He hated being approached at traffic lights. That's what he had a chauffeur for. To avoid The world outside. The window, however, slid down automatically. His personal assistant had programmed the car to open the windows at specific traffic lights, something about humanizing his public image after the latest scandal in the media. That ridiculous idea of social responsibility that his marketing department insisted on pushing. "Mister, wanna buy some candy? It's only $2 a pack." The childish voice came out hoarse, punctuated by a throat clearing. The millionaire didn't even bother to look directly at the child. He remained fixed on his cell phone, responding with a dry and impatient no. A 6-year-old girl was selling candy at the traffic lights to buy medicine for her sick grandma. But when she started coughing up blood at the window of a millionaire's car, something inside him stirred. What happened next would forever change both their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. The millionaire adjusted his Italian silk tie as he surveyed the city from his penthouse high above. A glass of 30-year-old scotch rested between his fingers, the amber liquid reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. Around him, the minimalist, designed apartment in shades of grey and white remained deathly silent. Not even the tick-tock of a clock dared to disturb that sterile atmosphere. He checked his platinum watch, a gift he'd given himself upon closing his first billion-dollar deal. He was late for yet another meeting where he would be feared and admired in equal measure. After all, one didn't become the youngest CEO in the country by being nice. Business demanded ruthlessness. People were just numbers on spreadsheets. Feelings were luxuries he couldn't afford. As his chauffeur drove the limo through the downtown streets, the millionaire typed furiously on his laptop. He needed to finalize the acquisition of yet another failing company. Hundreds of layoffs were planned, but the profit would compensate. It was just business. Miles away in a neighborhood the millionaire would never visit, small, trembling hands organized colorful candies into crumpled plastic baggies. The girl coughed repeatedly, trying to muffle the sound with a faded rag. She didn't want to wake her grandma, who had finally managed to fall asleep after a whole night moaning in pain. The makeshift shack they called home barely protected them from the wind whistling through the gaps in the boards. A corrugated iron roof, supported by a few rotting wooden pillars, sheltered a thin mattress where the old woman rested, covered by patched but impeccably clean sheets. It was a few square feet of dignity that the girl struggled to maintain. "Grandma," she whispered, approaching the mattress, "I'm going to sell the candies today. I'll get money for the medicine." The old woman opened her eyes, clouded by fever. Her lips, cracked from dehydration, tried to form a smile. "You shouldn't. The streets are dangerous," she murmured, too weak to complete the sentence. The girl held her grandmother's bony hand, feeling her hot, dry skin. The fever was getting worse. The antibiotic the back alley pharmacist had recommended cost almost $100, a fortune for someone who lived on pocket change. "I'll be back soon, Grandma. I promise." Swallowing tears and ignoring the dizziness the fever caused, the girl put her baggies of candy in a small cloth sack. Before leaving, she kissed her grandmother's forehead and straightened the only photo they possessed. A faded picture where the girl smiled, with fewer teeth and more joy in her eyes. As she walked to the main avenue, the girl rehearsed her best smile. She had learned that smiles sold more than tears. People liked to feel they were helping someone cheerful, not a sad burden. So she smiled even when her fragile legs barely supported her small body. She smiled even when the cough tore through her chest. She smiled because it was the only thing she could offer the world, besides sugary candies wrapped in hope. The sun beat down on her already tanned skin when she arrived at the busiest traffic light in the neighborhood. There, amidst horns and exhaust fumes, the little vendor approached closed windows with a resilience that didn't match her 6 years of age. Neither of them could have imagined that the red light that was about to turn on would forever change the course of their lives. The black Porsche stopped at the light, purring like a satisfied predator. Inside the refrigerated vehicle, the millionaire frowned as he realized his video conference had been interrupted by the poor connection. He cursed softly, annoyed by the wasted time. Seconds to him meant thousands in deals. That's when a dry cough caught his attention. He reluctantly turned his face and saw, through the tinted glass, a small silhouette approaching. He sighed in irritation. He hated being approached at traffic lights. That's what he had a chauffeur for. To avoid the world outside. The window, however, slid down automatically. His personal assistant had programmed the car to open the windows at specific traffic lights, something about humanizing his public image after the latest scandal in the media. That ridiculous idea of social responsibility that his marketing department insisted on pushing. "Mister, wanna buy some candy? It's only $2 a pack." The childish voice came out hoarse, punctuated by a throat clearing. The millionaire didn't even bother to look directly at the child. He remained fixed on his cell phone, responding with a dry and impatient no. A 6-year-old girl was selling candy at the traffic lights to buy medicine for her sick grandma. But when she started coughing up blood at the window of a millionaire's car, something inside him stirred. What happened next would forever change both their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. The millionaire adjusted his Italian silk tie as he surveyed the city from his penthouse high above. A glass of 30-year-old scotch rested between his fingers, the amber liquid reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. Around him, the minimalist, designed apartment in shades of grey and white remained deathly silent. Not even the tick-tock of a clock dared to disturb that sterile atmosphere. He checked his platinum watch, a gift he'd given himself upon closing his first billion-dollar deal. He was late for yet another meeting where he would be feared and admired in equal measure. After all, one didn't become the youngest CEO in the country by being nice. Business demanded ruthlessness. People were just numbers on spreadsheets. Feelings were luxuries he couldn't afford. As his chauffeur drove the limo through the downtown streets, the millionaire typed furiously on his laptop. He needed to finalize the acquisition of yet another failing company. Hundreds of layoffs were planned, but the profit would compensate. It was just business. Miles away, in a neighborhood the millionaire would never visit, small, trembling hands organized colorful candies into crumpled plastic baggies. The girl coughed repeatedly, trying to muffle the sound with a faded rag. She didn't want to wake her grandma, who had finally managed to fall asleep after a whole night moaning in pain. The makeshift shack they called home barely protected them from the wind whistling through the gaps in the boards. A corrugated iron roof, supported by a few rotting wooden pillars, sheltered a thin mattress where the old woman rested, covered by patched but impeccably clean sheets. It was a few square feet of dignity that the girl struggled to maintain. "Grandma," she whispered, approaching the mattress, "I'm going to sell the candies today. I'll get money for the medicine." The old woman opened her eyes, clouded by fever. Her lips, cracked from dehydration, tried to form a smile. "You shouldn't. The streets are dangerous," she murmured, too weak to complete the sentence. The girl held her grandmother's bony hand, feeling her hot, dry skin. The fever was getting worse. The antibiotic the back alley pharmacist had recommended cost almost $100, a fortune for someone who lived on pocket change. "I'll be back soon, Grandma. I promise." Swallowing tears and ignoring the dizziness the fever caused, the girl put her baggies of candy in a small cloth sack. Before leaving, she kissed her grandmother's forehead and straightened the only photo they possessed. A faded picture where the girl smiled, with fewer teeth and more joy in her eyes. As she walked to the main avenue, the girl rehearsed her best smile. She had learned that smiles sold more than tears. People liked to feel they were helping someone cheerful, not a sad burden. So she smiled even when her fragile legs barely supported her small body. She smiled even when the cough tore through her chest. She smiled because it was the only thing she could offer the world, besides sugary candies wrapped in hope. The sun beat down on her already tanned skin when she arrived at the busiest traffic light in the neighborhood. There, amidst horns and exhaust fumes, the little vendor approached closed windows with a resilience that didn't match her 6 years of age. Neither of them could have imagined that the red light that was about to turn on would forever change the course of their lives. The black Porsche stopped at the light, purring like a satisfied predator. Inside the refrigerated vehicle, the millionaire frowned as he realized his video conference had been interrupted by the poor connection. He cursed softly, annoyed by the wasted time. Seconds to him meant thousands in deals. That's when a dry cough caught his attention. He reluctantly turned his face and saw, through the tinted glass, a small silhouette approaching. He sighed in irritation. He hated being approached at traffic lights. That's what he had a chauffeur for, to avoid the world outside. The window, however, slid down automatically. His personal assistant had programmed the car to open the windows at specific traffic lights, something about humanizing his public image after the latest scandal in the media. That ridiculous idea of social responsibility that his marketing department insisted on pushing. "Mister, wanna buy some candy? It's only $2 a pack." The childish voice came out hoarse, punctuated by a throat clearing. The millionaire didn't even bother to look directly at the child. He remained fixed on his cell phone, responding with a dry and impatient no. It was then that he heard the sound, a wet and agonizing noise, something that shouldn't come from a child. Raising his eyes, he met the girl's gaze. She covered her mouth with a grimy cloth, now stained red. Blood. But that wasn't what disturbed him. It was the look. Brown eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Eyes that had no right to exist in such a young face. "I'm sorry, mister," she said, after controlling the cough. The girl carefully folded the cloth, hiding the red stain. "It's okay, mister. Grandma's waiting for the medicine. If she dies, it's my fault." That sentence, so adult, so resigned, hit the millionaire like a punch. Something in the way she took responsibility, something in the guilt she carried, was familiar, painfully familiar. "Wait," he heard himself say, surprising himself. The light had already turned green, and cars were honking behind him. The girl was already walking away, staggering slightly towards the next car. There was dignity in her steps, even when her fragile legs threatened to fail. "Pull over," he ordered his driver, who obeyed promptly. Getting out of the vehicle, the millionaire felt the suffocating heat of the city for the first time that day. His Italian shoes touched the hot asphalt as he walked towards the girl. The people around watched curiously. It wasn't every day that a man in an impeccable suit approached a street child. "How much does the medicine cost?" he asked abruptly when he reached her. The girl stared at him suspiciously. She had learned too early not to trust well-dressed adults showing sudden interest. $100, she replied, holding her bag of candy tightly against her chest. "But I just need to sell 20 more packs. I already have $60 saved in our hideout." Something in the word hideout made the millionaire's heart clench. A makeshift safe, perhaps, a hole in the ground, a hidden can. He had already known those treasures of poverty. "Show me where your grandma is," he ordered, more than asked. The girl hesitated, her eyes now wary. "Why? Are you a doctor?" "No," he answered honestly, "but I can help." "Why?" she repeated, with the raw wisdom that only the streets teach. "Nobody helps for free." The millionaire had no answer. Not even he knew why he had gotten out of the car, why that sentence had hit him so deeply, why, For the first time in decades, he felt something beyond the cold ambition that guided him. Because, he began, searching for words that weren't lies. Because I want to see if I can. The girl studied him for a few more seconds, weighing her limited options. Finally, with an almost imperceptible nod, she started walking, expecting him to follow her. And he followed, leaving behind his perplexed chauffeur, his important meeting, and the safety of his controlled world. He followed an unknown child to a place he never imagined visiting, guided by something he had long buried: his humanity. The path to the shack seemed to transport the millionaire to another planet. The streets became narrower, the asphalt giving way to dirt. Narrow alleys snaked between makeshift buildings, where entire lives happened in spaces smaller than his. Walk-in closet. As they advanced, he noticed the distrustful looks that followed them. His Italian suit and polished shoes screamed that he didn't belong there. He felt exposed, vulnerable. Each step reminded him that he was out of his comfort zone. "It's right there." The girl pointed to an abandoned shed at the end of the alley. His steps faltered. What was he doing? Following a street child to an unknown place? It was madness, reckless, completely out of character. "Wait," he called, stopping abruptly. Maybe it's better if I just give you the money for the medicine." He took his wallet out of his suit's inside pocket and held out $200 bills. "This should cover the medicine." The girl looked at the money, then at him with an expression that mixed surprise and something more complex, a kind of disappointment too mature for her age. "Thank you, mister," she said, taking only one of the bills. "This is enough for the medicine." He pushed the second bill forward. "Keep the rest. For food or—" "You don't have to be afraid," she interrupted, ignoring the extra money. "Nobody's going to rob you there. It's just me and Grandma." The millionaire felt his face flush with shame. Was he that transparent? Or did that child simply understand how the world worked better than she should? "It's not that," he lied. "I have an important meeting and—" The girl nodded, as if she perfectly understood the complexities of his corporate schedule. "It's okay, thank you very much." She carefully put the bill in an inside pocket of her faded dress. She turned to leave, and the millionaire felt something strange, an inexplicable emptiness, a sense of lost opportunity. "Wait," he said again. "I'll go with you." His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was his assistant, probably asking where the hell he was and reminding him of the 5 meetings he would miss that afternoon. He ignored it. The girl just smiled, not the rehearsed smile she used to sell candy, but something smaller, more genuine. They continued walking. As they rounded the abandoned shed, the millionaire saw a precarious construction that looked more like a pile of discarded materials. Pieces of plywood, sheets of corrugated metal, plastic tarps, all joined in a desperate effort to create shelter. "It's here," the girl announced, pushing aside a piece of fabric that served as a door. The interior was dark, the air heavy and humid. When his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw the skeletal figure of an old woman lying on a thin mattress. The woman was burning with fever, murmuring incomprehensible words. "Grandma, I brought help," the girl said softly, kneeling beside the mattress. "He gave me money for the medicine." The millionaire remained paralyzed at the entrance. That scene. The sick grandmother, the devoted granddaughter, awakened memories he had buried decades ago. His own grandmother, the only person who had ever loved him unconditionally, had died alone while he built his empire. "I'm going to get the medicine now," the girl announced, already preparing to leave again. "No," the word escaped his mouth. Before he could think, "Your grandmother needs a hospital." "We don't have papers," the girl replied with the naturalness of someone explaining the obvious. "And hospitals are for those who have money." "I have money," he replied, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. Something inside him rebelled against the idea of leaving there and returning to his sterile world, leaving those two to their own devices. It was irrational, inconvenient, completely out of his plans. His assistant would have a fit. The board would question his sanity. His legal department would list the risks of personal involvement with charity cases. Still, when the old woman coughed violently, writhing in pain, the millionaire already had his phone in his hand, ordering his driver to come immediately with the car. "We're taking your grandmother to the hospital," he declared, putting the phone back in his pocket. "Now." The girl stared at him with wide eyes, distrust and hope fighting in her gaze. "They won't let us in." "They will," guaranteed the millionaire, with the confidence of someone who rarely hears the word no. While they waited for the car, he watched the girl wet a tattered cloth in a basin of water and carefully place it on her grandmother's forehead. There was tenderness in her gestures, devotion, the same that he had seen in his own grandmother's eyes so many years ago. His phone kept vibrating incessantly in his pocket. The world he had built so carefully demanded his attention. Contracts, mergers, acquisitions, all waiting for decisions that only he could make. For the first time in years, he let them wait. The private hospital stood like a monument of glass and steel, imposing and intimidating. In the polished, marble lobby, the arrival of the trio caused immediate commotion. The millionaire, in his impeccable suit, carried the unconscious old woman in his arms, while the girl, with her faded dress and worn shoes, firmly held the hem of his jacket. "I need a doctor, now," he demanded, with the voice he used to use. In board meetings, the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with hair rigidly tied in a bun, looked from the millionaire to the old woman and then to the girl. Her face transformed into a mask of poorly disguised disdain. "Are you a relative?" she asked, without making any move to call for medical help. "Does that matter?" he retorted coldly. "Standard procedure," the receptionist insisted. "We need documentation and health insurance before proceeding with any treatment." The millionaire felt the little girl's small hand grip the fabric of his jacket tighter. He noticed the fear in her eyes, the fear that even here, in the presence of all the technology and medical knowledge, the doors would remain closed to people like them. "Call Dr. Miller," he ordered, mentioning the name of the hospital director with whom he occasionally played golf. "Tell him I'm here and that I expect immediate attention." The mention of the name had an instant effect. The receptionist paled, quickly picking up the phone. Minutes later, a medical team arrived with a gurney, taking the old woman inside. The girl tried to follow them, but was stopped by a nurse. "Family only," said the professional with a suspicious look at the ragged child. "She's family," the millionaire interjected, surprising even himself. "And she's coming in with me." They accompanied the gurney to an emergency room, where doctors and nurses immediately began to work. Beside him, the little one wore a simple but elegant dress, chosen personally by him in a department store, an experience that had been simultaneously disastrous and revealing. "It's too tight," she had complained about the first excessively ornamented model that the saleswoman had suggested, "and it's too sparkly. It looks like a Christmas tree." The saleswoman had been scandalized, but the millionaire couldn't contain a genuine laugh, something he hadn't done in so long that the very sound surprised him. In the end, the little one had chosen the simplest dress in the store, light blue without ruffles or excessive embellishments. "It's pretty, and it doesn't bother me," she explained pragmatically. Now, as they walked through the event hall, she held his hand firmly, observing everything with attentive eyes, but remaining silent. In the 2 weeks they had spent together, the millionaire had learned to respect that silence. It wasn't shyness, but a caution learned on the streets, the art of observing before acting. "My God, you actually brought her," commented a socialite, approaching with a plastic smile. "Everyone's talking about it, how adorable your charity is." The word came out loaded with insinuations. In the social circles he frequented, his sudden closeness with a street child had generated speculation of all kinds, from a personal marketing strategy to darker theories. "It's not charity," he replied dryly. "It's..." He stopped, realizing that he didn't exactly know how to define what was happening. What was that child to him? A responsibility? A form of redemption? A connection with something he had lost a long time ago? The little one squeezed his hand gently, as if she sensed his discomfort. "Dinner is served," announced a voice on the sound system. "Please proceed to your tables." They sat at the head table, where the millionaire, as the hospital's largest donor, occupied the place of honor. The little one observed the multiple pieces of silverware with a confused expression. "Start from the outside in," he whispered to her, demonstrating discreetly. She nodded, imitating his gestures with determination. There was dignity in her effort, not shame for not knowing, but the resolution to learn. After dinner, the hospital director took the stage for the usual speeches. Thanks, impressive numbers, promises of new equipment. Finally, he announced, "And now, I would like to call our main benefactor, who this year surprised everyone not only with his financial generosity, but also with an unexpected personal involvement." The millionaire walked to the stage, feeling the weight of all the eyes, some curious, others skeptical, few genuinely admiring. He had prepared a standard speech about social responsibility and the role of companies in society, empty words, that his marketing department had written. Upon reaching the microphone, however, he folded the paper and put it in his pocket. "3 weeks ago," he began, his voice echoing through the silent hall, "I stopped at a traffic light." The words flowed effortlessly as he narrated the encounter with the little one, the vision of the sick grandmother, the rush to the hospital. He didn't mention names or details that could identify them, but he described with raw honesty the impact that encounter had had on his life. "All of you know me as a businessman," he continued. "Some admire me for it, others fear me. Few, actually, like me." A nervous laugh ran through the audience. "And maybe I've earned that reputation." He paused, his eyes meeting those of the little one, who was watching him attentively from the head table. "What nobody knows is that I grew up in a shack not much different from the one where I found this child and her grandmother." A murmur of surprise ran through the hall. It was a secret he had zealously guarded, the humble origin that didn't match the carefully constructed image of the tycoon born for success. "My grandmother raised me alone, working 3 jobs to give me an education. She got sick when I was in college, but I was too busy building my future to go back and take care of her." His voice faltered slightly, but he recovered. "She died, alone, waiting for me. And I promised myself that her sacrifice would be worth it, that I would be the best, the richest, the most powerful, as if that could justify my absence." The silence in the auditorium was absolute now. What nobody told me is that it doesn't matter how much money you accumulate, how much power you have, how many empires you build, they don't fill the void left by the bonds you sacrificed along the way. His eyes met again those of the little one who was watching him with a disturbing intensity. "I thought I was helping that child and her grandmother," he confessed, his voice choked with emotion. "But the truth is, she saved me. She reminded me of who I was before I became this." He gestured to himself, to the expensive tuxedo, to the luxurious hall. "My grandmother adopted me when I was just a few days old," interrupted the millionaire, the pieces fitting into a puzzle he never knew existed. "She never told me who my biological parents were, just that she loved me as if I was her own daughter that had brought me into the world." The old woman reached out a trembling hand, touching his face gently, as if trying to find in the lines of his face the confirmation of something her heart already knew. "I tried to find you," she whispered, "for years. But then I met a good man who accepted me even with my history. We had a daughter," her voice faltered, "the mother of my granddaughter. She and her husband died in an accident when the little one was only 2 years old. The revelations fell like bombs, completely redesigning the map of their lives. So the little one is your niece," completed the old woman, "and I am..." She couldn't finish the sentence, sobs replacing the words that didn't need to be said. The millionaire, a man who had built his life avoiding any display of vulnerability, found himself crying openly, holding the hand of the woman he now knew to be his biological mother. Fate, that unpredictable playwright, had written a coincidence, so improbable that it bordered on the miraculous. The same traffic light, the same moment, the same words that awakened a connection they didn't even know existed. When he finally managed to compose himself, the millionaire perceived the weight of that revelation, and also its fragility. "I need a DNA test," he said softly. "Not because I doubt it, but because we need to be legally certain. To protect the little one, to ensure that no one can separate us." The old woman nodded, understanding the practical logic behind that request. "She doesn't know," she warned. "I never told her about the adoption, about Michael, about any of this." "Nor should she know yet," agreed the millionaire. "She's too young to understand all the complexity. When the time is right." The conversation was interrupted by the abrupt arrival of a social worker, accompanied by 2 police officers and the hospital director. Their serious faces announced problems even before they spoke. "Sir," began the social worker, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, "we received an anonymous tip about the irregular situation of the minor under your care. Without legal guardianship established, what we have here is technically an unauthorized removal." The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. Someone, probably someone who had been at the charity event, had reported the situation to the authorities. "The child is being well cared for," interjected the hospital director, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "And the procedure for regularization has already been initiated." "Unfortunately, that's not enough," replied the social worker. "Until there is a court decision, the minor must be placed in a temporary shelter." "No!" exclaimed the old woman, trying to get out of bed. "She's my granddaughter. You can't take her." "Ma'am, you are not in a condition to take care of her at the moment," explained the social worker, with a false sweetness that only intensified the cruelty of the situation. "And this gentleman has no legal ties to the child." "He's my son," declared the old woman, grabbing the millionaire's hand. "Her uncle, he's family." The statement provoked skeptical looks. Without documentation, without proof, the declaration sounded like a desperate attempt to prevent separation. "We will do a DNA test," affirmed the millionaire, standing up. "Today. And while we await the result, I will request a restraining order from the judge." As he spoke, his phone rang. It was his chauffeur, reporting that the private school where he had enrolled the little one was trying to contact him urgently. The dread he felt at that moment was something he had never experienced before, not even during the financial crises that almost destroyed his empire. It was a visceral, primordial fear. The fear of losing someone who, in such a short time, had become essential in his life. Upon arriving at the school, they found the little one in the principal's office, accompanied by another social worker. Her eyes were red from crying, but she kept her chin up, that silent dignity that had always impressed him. Upon seeing him, she ran towards him, clinging to his legs. "They said they're going to take me away," she sobbed, "that I can't stay with you anymore." The millionaire lifted her in his arms, feeling her small body tremble against his. "That's Not going to happen, he promised, staring directly at the social worker. I'll fix this, trust me. But the laws were clear, and even with all his power and influence, there were procedures he couldn't ignore. The DNA tests would take days to come back. The restraining order would depend on the goodwill of a judge. Many of you speculate about my motivations. Some say it's publicity, others suggest guilt or a sudden fit of social conscience. The truth is simpler and more complicated. He took a deep breath before continuing. That girl showed me what it is to love unconditionally, what it is to sacrifice everything for someone without expecting anything in return. She risked her own health every day for her grandmother, while I couldn't interrupt my schedule to say goodbye to mine. Tears he had not allowed himself for a long time glistened in his eyes. So no, it's not charity. It's gratitude for showing me that I'm still capable of feeling something beyond ambition, that maybe there's still time to be more than a rich man, to be a human being. When he returned to the table, the little one greeted him with a silent hug. At that moment, in front of hundreds of witnesses of high society, the powerful millionaire returned the hug without caring about his reputation as an unwavering man. Later, as they drove home in the limo, the little one broke the silence. Grandma said you look like someone. The millionaire looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Today, when we visited her before dinner, she looked at you and said, you look like someone she knew a long time ago. He frowned, intrigued. The old woman had awakened from the medical coma just 3 days ago and was still too weak for prolonged conversations. Did she say anything else? The little one hesitated, as if choosing her words. She asked if your name is Michael. The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. Michael was the name of his father, a man he barely knew, who had abandoned his mother even before his birth. Why would she ask that? I don't know, the little one shrugged. But she kept looking at you for a long time, and then she cried. The millionaire remained silent for the rest of the ride, his mind a whirlwind of questions and improbable possibilities. Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something deeper connecting him to that family that fate had placed in his path? That night he couldn't sleep. He rummaged through old boxes he kept in the back of a closet, the few relics he had kept from his childhood. He found a yellowed photo of his grandmother, young and smiling, next to a man he knew only through that image, his father. He studied the face of the man he had never met, trying to find answers to questions he didn't even know how to formulate. The next morning, he arrived at the hospital earlier than usual, alone. He needed to talk to the old woman in private. The soft morning light filtered through the curtains of the hospital room where the old woman rested. Her condition had improved considerably in recent weeks. The color had returned to her face, and her eyes, once clouded by fever, now observed the world with renewed clarity. The millionaire hesitated at the door, feeling an anxiety he rarely experienced. In business, he'd always been direct, ruthless even. But now, before that fragile woman, the questions that burned in his throat seemed too heavy. "May I come in?" he asked, breaking the usual protocol. Normally, he simply walked in, his position as benefactor of the hospital guaranteeing him that privilege. The old woman turned her face towards him and nodded silently. There was something in her gaze, a mixture of apprehension and recognition, that fueled the suspicions that had kept him awake during the night. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, sitting in the chair next to the bed. "Better," she replied, her voice still weak but firm. "Thanks to you." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. The millionaire removed from his pocket the yellowed photograph he had found the night before. "My granddaughter mentioned that you asked about someone named Michael," he said finally, deciding to be direct. "Michael was my father's name." The old woman closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing the impact of that confirmation. I knew a Michael many years ago, she replied carefully. He had your eyes. The millionaire placed the photograph on the hospital bed. This man? Tears welled up in the old woman's eyes when she recognized the image. She nodded slowly. How? Was all the millionaire could ask, his mind trying to process the implications of that confirmation. He worked for my family when I was young, explained the old woman. We were close, very close, but my father found out and kicked him out of town. She hesitated. I was expecting his child. The millionaire felt the world spin around him. The implications were impossible, unthinkable. And yet, what happened to the child? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. My father forced me to give him up for adoption, she replied, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. I was too young. I had no way to support a baby alone. I promised myself that one day I would find him, but that afternoon, with a broken heart, he watched as the little one was taken to a temporary shelter. The promise of daily visits and the guarantee that the situation would be temporary seemed empty in the face of the child's frightened eyes. I'll get you, he promised again, kneeling to be at her eye level. Don't doubt that for a second. We're family now. The word family, which for so long had been just an abstract concept in his life, now carried the weight of a newly discovered truth, of a bond that no court could deny. When the social services car disappeared around the corner, the millionaire remained motionless on the sidewalk, feeling a part of himself being torn away. The mansion to which he would return now seemed emptier and colder than ever. But something had changed fundamentally within him. The man who had always gotten what he wanted through power and money now faced a system that didn't easily bend to those tools. He would need something more: perseverance, patience, and that quality that the little one had taught him without realizing it: unconditional love. That night, alone in his office, with a determination he normally reserved for hostile takeovers and high-stakes negotiations, he began to draw up a plan, not only to regain custody of the little one, but to rebuild the family he never knew he had. The phone rang repeatedly. Associates worried about his prolonged absence from business, the board questioning his priorities, investors nervous about the rumors of his emotional breakdown. For the first time in his career, he let it ring, without answering. Some battles were more important than others. The municipal children's shelter was a grey 3-story building, surrounded by a high fence painted dark green. Inside, despite the evident efforts of the staff, an institutional atmosphere prevailed that no colourful decoration could completely disguise. The millionaire, wearing jeans and a simple shirt, clothes he hadn't worn since college, waited in the visiting room. He had rigorously followed the protocol, respecting schedules and limitations, aware that any slip-up would harm his case. When the little one entered, her face lit up with a smile that contradicted the somber environment. She ran to him, hugging him tightly. "You came," she whispered against his chest. "Every day," he confirmed, returning the hug, "as I promised." During the hour allowed for the visit, the little one told him about her routine at the shelter. The other children, the strict rules, the meals at fixed times. There was no complaint in her voice, just the factual statement of her new reality. "Is Grandma going to be okay?" she asked, her concern evident. "She's getting better every day," the millionaire assured her. "She asks about you all the time." He didn't mention the bombshell revelation, the kinship that united them, the improbable miracle that had put their paths on a collision course. It wasn't the right time yet. At the end of the visit, when the staff member came to get the little one, she held his hands tightly. "I know you're going to take me back," she said with unwavering certainty. "Grandma always says that real people keep promises." That trust, so pure, so absolute, was a weight and an honor that the millionaire carried as he left the shelter. For decades, He had been feared and respected, but never truly trusted in that simple and complete way. At the hospital, he found the old woman, his biological mother. It was still difficult to process this reality, sitting on the bed, visibly stronger. "The results are in," he announced, showing the sealed envelope he was carrying. "I wanted us to be together to open it." Although both were certain of what they would find, there was a solemnity in the moment, the scientific confirmation of a bond that fate had revealed through improbable coincidences. With slightly trembling hands, the millionaire opened the envelope and read the result aloud. Probability of first-degree kinship, 99.998%. The old woman cried silently, extending her arms to that son whom fate had taken and returned in such extraordinary circumstances. "What will we do now?" she asked, after the initial emotions subsided. "I've already started the legal proceedings," explained the millionaire. "With this test, I can apply for temporary guardianship of the little one as a blood relative. Simultaneously, we are regularizing her documentation and yours." He spoke with the confidence of someone who had dedicated every minute of the past few days, researching, consulting experts, putting together an impeccable strategy. The same energy that he previously directed exclusively towards millionaire acquisitions was now channeled into reuniting his newfound family. "And your business?" asked the old woman, surprising him with her perspicacity. "I overheard the nurses commenting that your stocks are falling." The millionaire shrugged, a casual gesture he would never have made a few weeks before. "I have good managers and enough money for several lifetimes." What he didn't say was that, for the first time, he was questioning the purpose of his empire. What was all that wealth for if he couldn't use it to protect what really mattered? The next morning, dressed in his best suit, the millionaire attended the hearing with the judge at juvenile court. His lawyer had prepared an impeccable dossier, the DNA test proving kinship, medical reports on the old woman's progress, a detailed care plan for the little one, including school, psychological support, and family structure. The judge, a middle-aged man with tired eyes who had seen too many family tragedies, carefully analyzed the documents. His expression, initially skeptical, after all, it wasn't every day that a billionaire appeared claiming kinship with a street child, gradually softened. "The documents are in order," he declared finally, "and the biological link is irrefutable. However, sir, I must ask, why so much interest? You've barely known this child for a month. Your life and hers couldn't be more different." The question, although expected, hit a sensitive spot. For a moment, the millionaire considered resorting to the rehearsed answers that his lawyer had prepared, arguments about family responsibility, moral duty, life opportunities. Instead, he opted for the raw truth. "Because she saved me, Your Honor," he replied simply. "I was dying slowly, suffocated by everything I built. She reminded me of what it is to be human." The judge studied him for a few seconds, as if assessing the sincerity of that statement. "Are you aware that guardianship is not a business contract?" he asked. "It cannot be undone when it becomes inconvenient or when the initial enthusiasm passes." "I am fully aware of that, Your Honor," replied the millionaire. "And for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that I intend to continue forever." The statement hung in the courtroom, a promise more binding than any contract he had ever signed. After deliberating briefly, the judge granted temporary guardianship with the condition of regular visits from social workers and follow-up hearings. It was less than the definitive guardianship that the millionaire had hoped for, but it was a start. That same afternoon, with the court order in hand, he drove to the shelter. The little one was already waiting for him at the reception desk, a tiny backpack containing her few belongings beside her. No words were necessary when their eyes met, just a mutual understanding, a silent promise honored. On the way home, They stopped by the hospital. The old woman, although still weak, had been authorized to be conditionally discharged for a special event, to see the new home where her family would gather. The mansion that had once seemed cold and impersonal had been transformed. One of the rooms near the millionaires had been decorated especially for the little one, not with the ostentatious luxury that his initial instinct would have suggested, but with the elements he had observed capturing her attention: books, a small telescope, colorful plants, and a large bed where her grandmother could sit to tell stories. For the old woman, the former ground floor office had been converted into an accessible suite, allowing her to move comfortably during her recovery. The walls, once bare, now displayed the only photograph they possessed, that faded image of the little one, now framed with affection. As they entered, the millionaire noticed the surprised expression on their faces. "I know it's not like the place you had," he explained, suddenly insecure. "We can change anything you don't like." The little one walked slowly through the space, touching the furniture, the curtains, observing every detail with her perceptive eyes. "It's different," she said finally, "but it's good." The old woman, leaning on a cane, approached the son. That fate had returned to her, touching his face gently. "You look so much like him," she murmured, "but you have my heart, always have, even when we didn't know." That night marked the beginning of something completely new in the millionaire's life. A family dinner, not a business dinner disguised as socializing, not a solitary meal in front of spreadsheets, but a true shared moment. The food was simple. The little one had confessed not to like the elaborate dishes that the personal chef prepared, and the conversation flowed naturally, interspersed with comfortable silences that didn't need to be filled. Later, while he was helping the little one get ready for bed, she asked the question he had simultaneously expected and feared. "Can I call you uncle now? For real?" The word, so simple, so loaded with meaning, made his heart expand in a way he didn't think possible. "Yes," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. "For real." "And are you my great-grandmother?" she asked the old woman, who was watching them from the doorway of the room. The millionaire and the old woman exchanged glances. They hadn't yet discussed how or when they would reveal the true nature of their connection. "I'm your blood grandmother, darling," replied the old woman softly, "and I always will be, no matter what name you use." The little one seemed to accept that answer without questioning, her world still defined by ties of affection more than by precise biological designations. Eventually, when she was older, she would understand the incredible tapestry that fate had woven to unite them. When the little one finally fell asleep, the millionaire remained beside her bed for a long moment, watching her peaceful breathing. For the first time since he could remember, he felt complete, not by acquiring something new, but by rediscovering something that had always been within him, just dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The months that followed established a new normal for the unlikely trio. The old woman recovered gradually, her health strengthened not only by the best medical care that money could buy, but also by the joy of having her family reunited. The little one adapted to private school, surprising teachers with her sharp intelligence and unique perspectives, shaped by experiences that no other child there possessed. The millionaire, in turn, completely reorganized his priorities. He delegated much of the day-to-day control of his businesses, drastically reduced his schedule of appointments, and established the non-negotiable ritual of being home every night for family dinner. The visits from social workers became routine, the initial distrust giving way to a reluctant admiration for the transformation they witnessed, not only in the material conditions of the little one and the old woman, but also in the millionaire himself, whose once perpetually tense face now often broke into spontaneous smiles. However, not everything was rosy in the new family arrangement. The hearing for permanent guardianship was approaching, and shadows from the past threatened the fragile happiness they had built. The first cloud on the horizon came in the form of an anonymous report to Child Protective Services, questioning the suspicious circumstances that led a powerful man to take in a child with no prior ties. The document insinuated obscure motivations, raising the possibility that the millionaire was using the situation to rehabilitate his public image after business scandals. The subsequent investigation found only a genuinely dedicated family, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The second complication came from where they least expected. The will of Michael, the millionaire's biological father, revealed the existence of a half-brother who, upon discovering the fortune of the newly reunited family, emerged from the shadows claiming his right to participate in the estate and questioning the veracity of the DNA test. While lawyers battled in court, the media transformed the private story into a public spectacle. Sensationalist headlines, conspiracy theories, and paparazzi became part of everyday life. The mansion, once a sanctuary, now seemed like a besieged fortress. On a particularly difficult afternoon, the millionaire found the little one hidden in his closet, clutching the only toy she had brought from the shack, a teddy bear balding from so much use. "Are they going to take me away again?" she asked, her big eyes fixed on his, seeking a truth she could bear. He sat on the floor next to her, his back against the wall, ignoring the Italian suit that would probably be ruined. "No," he replied, firmly, "never again. But on TV, that man said that you're just using me, that it's not for real." The millionaire felt a cold rage at the thought of the commentators dissecting his life without any consideration for the impact of their words. On a 6-year-old child. "What do you think?" he asked softly. "You, who knows me better than any reporter, is it for real?" The little one studied his face for a long moment with that penetrating intensity she had always possessed. "Yes," she replied finally. "It's for real." That night, while the little one and the old woman slept, the millionaire made a radical decision. The next morning, he called a press conference, the first in his career that wasn't directly related to his businesses. Dozens of journalists crowded into the conference room of his central office, cameras ready to capture any sign of weakness or contradiction. It was the kind of exposure he had always meticulously avoided. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his calm voice belying the storm within. "In recent months, my private life has become a subject of public speculation. Today, I will clarify a few points, and after that, I hope my family can be left in peace." A murmur ran through the room. The infamous Brazilian Wolf of Wall Street, known for his relentless coldness, talking about family as if he were an ordinary man. "First, yes, the little one who is under my care is my biological niece, daughter of my deceased sister, as confirmed by official DNA tests. Second, the elderly woman who lives with us is my biological mother, from whom I was separated at birth by circumstances beyond our control." The revelation, although already suspected by many, caused a stir among those present. Finding them was what some would call coincidence and others fate. But what matters is not how we met, but what we choose to do from that meeting. He paused, allowing his words to be absorbed. "As for the allegations of my alleged half-brother, we await the results of the DNA tests that he initially refused to take. I am open to welcoming him into our family if his claim is legitimate. However, I make it clear that this will not change in any way my dedication to the little one and my mother." His voice gained a note of steel as he continued. "Finally, about the insinuations that my interest in the little one has hidden or improper motivations. Such allegations are not only false, but deeply harmful to an innocent child who has already faced more hardship than anyone in this room will ever know." Leaning slightly forward, he looked directly at the cameras, That girl has taught me more about courage, dignity, and unconditional love in a few months than I have learned in decades in the corridors of power. She is not my charity case. She is my salvation. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of a door opening. The little one, who was supposed to be at school, entered the room accompanied by the social worker assigned to her case. Apparently, they had arrived for a surprise visit to the office, only to stumble upon the press conference. Seeing her, the millionaire immediately forgot the cameras, the journalists, the entire media circus. He knelt, opening his arms, and the little one ran into his embrace, hiding her face on his shoulder. At that moment, without any of them knowing, a photographer captured the image that would be plastered on newspapers across the country the next day. The powerful businessman, on his knees, embracing the little one as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. The photo was worth more than 1,000 words or explanations, revealing a truth that no malicious speculation could obscure. The social worker, observing the scene, made a note on her clipboard. Later, her report to the judge would be unequivocal. Genuine and healthy emotional bond. I strongly recommend granting permanent guardianship. The following week, the court battle reached its climax. The alleged half-brother, after the negative results of the DNA test, disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. The last obstacles to permanent guardianship were knocked down one by one, thanks to the combination of scientific evidence, positive reports from social workers, and the surprisingly eloquent testimony of the little one, who, when asked by the judge with whom she would like to live, replied simply, "With my family, my uncle and my grandma." On the day of the final hearing, the courthouse was surrounded by reporters and onlookers. The case had captured the public's imagination, transforming into a kind of modern fairy tale. The cold-hearted tycoon melted by the love of a child. Inside the room, however, the atmosphere was solemn. The judge, after reviewing all the documents and listening to the final testimonies, withdrew briefly to deliberate. When he returned, his face was grave, but his eyes revealed a satisfaction, rarely demonstrated in his often tragic role. "It is with great pleasure," he announced, "that I grant permanent guardianship of the minor to the applicant, officially recognizing the family ties proven by genetic tests and, more importantly, by the emotional bond observed by all professionals involved in this case." Banging the gavel, he concluded, "This child has finally found her home. May it be a home of love, respect, and opportunities that every human being deserves." As they left the courthouse, a sea of flashes greeted them. The millionaire, holding the little one's hand firmly, made his way through the reporters to the car that awaited them, where the old woman, now legally recognized as the child's great-grandmother, waited anxiously. "Did we do it?" she asked when they got into the vehicle. The millionaire nodded, unable to form words through the emotion that tightened his throat. The little one, in turn, looked out the window at the crowd of strangers who showed so much interest in their lives. With the wisdom that had always characterized her, she declared, "We always knew who we were. Now everyone else knows too." And the car drove off, taking them not only to the mansion, but to a future that none of them could have imagined on that fateful day at the traffic light. A year had passed since the historic court decision. The mansion, once a monument to loneliness disguised as luxury, now reverberated with sounds that its architect had never foreseen. Children's laughter, warm conversations, even occasional arguments, invariably followed by sincere reconciliations. It was a Sunday morning, and the millionaire, although this title still technically applied, it no longer defined his essence, watched the garden through the large window of the living room. The little one, now 7 years old, ran across the grass, chasing soap bubbles that her great-grandmother blew from a small bottle. The old woman, whose cheeks had regained their color and whose steps were now firm, laughed like a girl, occasionally sitting down to rest on the bench that had been installed especially for her under the centuries-old oak tree. The scene, so trivial for many families, represented for him a daily miracle, the second chance he never imagined he deserved. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a reminder of the outside world that was still spinning, of the businesses that still demanded his attention, although in a much more limited way now. He ignored it momentarily, reluctant to break the spell of that moment. Much had changed in his professional life since the famous traffic light case, as the media had dubbed the unlikely reunion of his family. His empire remained solid, but his priorities had radically transformed. The foundation he had created, initially as a symbolic gesture to help elderly caregivers of vulnerable children, had grown exponentially, becoming his true professional passion. The problem, he had discovered, was much larger than he imagined. Thousands of grandmothers, often without documentation or resources, dedicated their last years to grandchildren, abandoned by absent, deceased, or incapacitated parents. Inspired by his own family's story, the project expanded to offer not only financial assistance, but also medical, legal, and educational support. The Houses of Hope, as they were known, already numbered dozens across the country, spaces where grandmothers and grandchildren found not only material help, but dignity and recognition. Many speculated about his sudden conversion to philanthropy. Some, the more cynical, saw only a personal marketing strategy. Others, perhaps closer to the truth, recognized the genuine transformation of a man who had rediscovered his humanity. What few understood was that for him, it wasn't about charity. It was a debt to his biological mother, who had lost him through circumstances beyond her control, to his adoptive grandmother, who had sacrificed everything to raise him, and to the little one, who had taught him the true value of the things that money can't buy. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the little one, who ran into the room, her hair now always well cared for, bouncing with her movements. "Uncle," she called, using the term of endearment she had adopted even after gradually understanding the complexity of their family ties. "Today is the day." He smiled, checking his watch. Yes, it was time for the opening ceremony of the largest House of Hope yet, built exactly in the neighborhood where he had found the little one and the old woman a year earlier. The event wouldn't be an ostentatious celebration with champagne and celebrities, as the openings in his previous life used to be. It would be a community festival with simple food stalls, toys for the children, and more importantly, the presence of dozens of grandmothers and grandchildren who would be the first beneficiaries of that space. "Are we ready?" asked the great-grandmother, entering the room leaning on her cane, an accessory she kept more out of caution than out of real need, now that her health was stabilized. "Almost," he replied, adjusting the ribbon on the little one's dress. "We just need one thing." From a nearby drawer, he took out 3 identical necklaces, simple silver chains with a small traffic light pendant, a gift he had specially made for that occasion. "So we never forget how we met," he explained, as he placed the necklaces around each of their necks. The little one examined the pendant with curiosity, turning it between her fingers. "You know," she said with that wisdom that always surprised the adults around her, "Grandma always says that nothing happens by accident." "And what do you think about that?" asked the uncle, genuinely interested in his niece's perspective. She reflected for a moment, her forehead furrowed in concentration. "I think good people attract good things, even when it seems like everything is bad." The great-grandmother smiled, her eyes watery. "When I was sick in that shack, I prayed every night for a miracle. Not for me, but for my granddaughter. And I got to sell the most expensive candy in the world that day," completed the little one with a mischievous smile. The 3 laughed together, a sound that had become common in that house, but that never lost its preciousness. On the she Way to the opening, they intentionally passed by the traffic light where it all began. It was different now. The asphalt, repaved, new signs, fewer street vendors. The city continued its relentless evolution. "Stop," asked the little one suddenly. "I want to see something." The driver, already accustomed to the family's unusual requests, pulled over obediently. The little one got out of the car, followed by her uncle and great-grandmother. She approached exactly the point where she had been a year before, selling candy with a fever and a cough. "It looks like another place," she commented, looking around, "but it's not." "How do you feel?" asked the uncle, watching her attentively. "Happy," she replied simply, "but a little sad too." "Why?" "Because there are many other children still. They're selling candy at traffic lights," she explained, with an understanding of reality that went far beyond her age. "And not all of them will be as lucky as I was." The millionaire knelt to be at his niece's eye level. "That's why we built the houses of hope," he said softly. "We can't help everyone at once, but every family we manage to support is a victory." The little one nodded gravely, processing that complex truth. "One day," she declared with determination, "I'm going to build as many houses as you, or more." "I have no doubt about that," replied the uncle with genuine pride. "You already have. A heart much bigger than mine." The great-grandmother, observing the scene, discreetly wiped away a tear. How many times had she dreamed of the son she had been forced to abandon? How many times had she imagined what his life, his character, his face would be like? And now, not only had she found him again, but she witnessed the extraordinary man he had become, not through power or material wealth, but through the ability to love and transform himself. The opening of the House of Hope was a simple but deeply meaningful event. Without grandiose speeches or ceremonial ribbon cuttings, just a genuine celebration with the families who would be welcomed there. The millionaire watching children playing in the new playground while grandmothers chatted in the shade of the newly planted trees felt a fullness that no business acquisition had ever given him. A reporter who had managed to get permission for a brief interview approached with her microphone. "You have invested a fortune in this project," she commented. "What do you expect to gain from it?" The question, formulated with the logic of the business world, investment and return, made the millionaire smile. "I've already gained it," he replied simply, looking at the little one who was helping an elderly woman serve herself juice, and at the great-grandmother who was chatting animatedly with other ladies of her age. "Much more than I deserved." The reporter, clearly dissatisfied with the vague answer, insisted, "But what is your ultimate goal with these institutions?" He reflected for a moment before answering. "You know, I spent decades accumulating wealth because I believed that was what would define me as a successful person. But I discovered through a girl who sold candy at a traffic light that true wealth is not what you have, but what you give." Pointing to the space around him, he continued, "Every smile we see here, every family that remains united despite the difficulties, every child who has the chance to be just a child, that is the return we seek." The reporter, surprisingly touched by those words, turned off her recorder. "Can I ask one last question? Off the record?" He nodded, intrigued. "Are you happy now?" she asked, with genuine curiosity. The millionaire looked again at his small, makeshift family, the great-grandmother that fate had returned to him late in life, and the niece who had entered his life through a red light. He thought about the mansion that had once been just a house, and now was a home, about the businesses that had once been his obsession, and now were just a part of his life, about the person he had been and the person he had become. "Yes," he replied with absolute certainty, for the first time truly happy. Later, as the sun began to set, the little family walked hand in hand through the garden of the new institution. The little one, always observant, noticed a discreet plaque near the entrance that hadn't been there during the ceremony. "What does it say?" she asked, still learning to read more complex words. The uncle read aloud, "Sometimes the love that saves comes from a traffic light, and from a child who insists on smiling even when the world doesn't return the favor." The little one smiled, recognizing her own words, said to her great-grandmother so many times when she tried to cheer her up on the toughest days. "I like it," she declared, swinging the traffic light pendant on her neck. "It's true." And as they walked together to the car, three silhouettes against the setting sun, the millionaire understood the most valuable lesson his journey had taught him. True wealth isn't measured by bank accounts or properties, but by the ability to love and be loved, to transform and be transformed, and that no red light could ever stop. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.